Welcome everyone. Today we're going to make a pouring vessel in Rhino to be 3D printed. And we're going to make it simple, functional, but we're also going to give it a little bit of personal flair, something kind of unique. You can come up with your own creative choices. You don't have to do yours exactly like this, but I'm going to walk us through what I've done here to reinforce some of what we've learned so far about 2D geometry, 3D tools and commands, polysurfaces, Boolean relationships, meshes, and some of the basic things we need to know to effectively make 3D models and print them on a 3D printer. So first thing I'm going to do, I always do my 2D stuff, my basic curves. I use the top viewport. It's just easier for me to visualize things this way. You can use a circle, rectangle, ellipse, polygon, whatever you wish. I'm just going to start here with an ellipse though. Nothing fancy. It's kind of simple. And an ellipse is fine, but I want it to have a little more, a little more character, something to give it some texture, just make it unique. So to give this kind of texture, you can see one of these sides is a little bit bumpy. We still have to start that idea, like how do we make something bumpy? We need 2D geometry to get us started with that. So my first strategy for doing something like that is to make a circle. I'll make a 10-inch radius circle, and I'll attach to the circumference of this circle let's see, I need my snap to say near. There we go, not center. So near, and I want it to be a 1-inch radius. And then I'm going to do an array polar with my smaller circle. And it's going to use the center of this 10-inch radius circle here. And because it's 10 inches, pi is, let's see, that's 3.14 and change. So I'm going to round it up to like 32. And I'm going to start it just around there, bring it back to the other side. And it's fine that these circles are overlapping because I'm going to do some trimming. And it's going to be really helpful. So to start my trimming operation, trim in the command bar, I'm going to use the big circle as the trimming object. And I'm going to trim away just some of the circles down here. I could do all of them, but I already know I don't need to trim all of them. So I'm going to save some time and just trim some of them. Now I'm going to get rid of my big circle. I'm going to delete that as well as some, or really most of these other circles here. And with this, cursory bumpy texture here, I'm going to make a little more helpful tool out of this by using the fillet command. Fillet. And play around with some different dimensions for the radius. I'm going to try using 1/4 of an inch. So 1/4 inch radius up here, and that gives us something like that. So I'm happy with that, but do something that works for you. So right click or control click if you're on Mac to re-equip the previously used tool. And if you're happy with the dimensions, you don't have to make any changes. You can just right click and then click, click, and just walk around this series of semicircles. Okay. Now, all of these are still separate curves. To make it simpler to use, I'm going to select everything, join in the command bar. That's a good habit to get into, is to join everything if you don't need them to be separate. So now I'm going to overlap my bumpy texture with my ellipse. And now I'm going to do another trimming operation, trim in the command bar. I'm first going to use the bumps as the trimming tool to trim away the bottom of the ellipse. And then I'm going to use the ellipse to trim away the sides of the bumps. And lastly, I'm going to do one more fillet to just kind of make a seamless transition between the ellipse and the bumps. And then join everything together. Whoops. Okay. So let me drag this over here because we're about here now. Let's take another look at our vessel. If you think about watering cans, teapots, cups, most vessels that we can think of are a little more narrow on the bottom than they are on top. So how can we mimic that here? You can try, there are always many ways of doing everything in Rhino. You can try doing the extrude CRV tapered command if you want. So extrude CRV tapered, choose your shape, and then try to build something out of it like this. You can probably check solid as yes and go ahead and get a solid form there. Or if I go back to the top viewport, I can copy and paste this shape, so I now have two of them. I'll undo that gumball move here for a second. So there are two shapes here, but they're in the same spot, so it looks like there's only one. I'm going to use scale and choose, let's see, the center. The ellipse center is still where it was, which is really cool. So center, and then this control point. And now the way that I expand this shape, it's very even, and it stays right in the center of all this. That's really helpful. So while I still have it selected, I can use the Z axis arrow on the gumball to raise this up a little bit. And now I can do a loft command, select my two shapes, and let's just try it out and see what happens at first. It looks cool, I think. This is interesting. But I think I need to make some changes here. So let me Control Z, and let's try loft again. But now, when these two arrows emerge, I'm going to move them. I'm going to start these arrows not in the really kind of rough terrain. And let's just see if this is any better. Okay, so if you're trying to loft two shapes to make a surface, and it doesn't look quite right at first, maybe just tinker with those arrow indicators to see if a little change can make some difference. In this case, it did. Sometimes you just don't know until you try. So I've got this surface now, which is great. So I'm going to use in my surface tools set, the surface from planar curves. And because I have a curve down below, I'm just going to use the curve, make a surface there, and then use the curve up top, select everything and join. And now let's take a look at this. It says one closed poly surface added to selection. That is very good news. All right, so we need to hollow this thing out. We need to make a big hole so that we have a form, but it's mostly hollow. So my go-to strategy for this is Boolean relationships. So for the moment, I'm going to hide some of this stuff on my screen just so it's not in the way. Hide all of this. Hide all of that. Okay. And I'm going to copy and paste my new form. And I think I'm going to use the front viewport for a second. I normally don't do this, but it might be helpful now. So with my copied form selected, I'm going to use scale 1D, and I'm going to scale it up. Try this again. You'll notice we stop seeing a flat line and we start seeing an ellipse, which means it is scaling. But let's go back to the perspective viewport and see. So it's scaling one-dimensionally, but what's happening here is I grabbed onto a point back here for my starting point for the scale, and then grabbed onto something up here for the other one. So now it's scaling at an angle. If this happens, there's a fun and really simple workaround for this. Let's try this out. In the top viewport, right next door to this work, I'm going to make a single line. It's perfectly vertical, and I'm going to select it in the perspective viewport, use my red curved line on the gumball, and rotate it 90 degrees to stand it up straight, tall, like this. So now from the front viewport, or really you could do this anyway, any way you want. I'll do it from the front and perspective. Scale 1D, and I'm going to use this line. Let's see if this looks any different. I did move it up in space. Okay. All right, I've made it taller. I do need to make it taller. I also need to make it overall a little bit smaller. So with it selected, scale, just regular scale this time. I'm going to use my construction geometry again. Bring it down a little bit. And maybe one more scale 1D. All right, now let's see if we can overlap these two forms. This is ghosted mode is really helpful for this kind of process. We need to make sure we have some bottom surface in the vessel and some wall thickness. All right, I think this will work. Let's give it a try. So Boolean two objects, and we can do Boolean two objects, by the way, because these are closed polysurfaces. So let's click on both of these and then cycle through the different iterations until we get our hollow form like this. Double check it to make sure we see one closed poly surface added to selection. All right. So let's keep building. We've only got a couple more things we want to do here. We need to give it a handle. So let's bring it down. Oh, and I don't need to do this, but I'll do it anyways. Show in the command bar. Bring the other examples back. All right, so let's start with a handle. In the top viewport, because I'm going to start with 2D geometry. Actually, I think to decide how to make this handle, what I really want to do is I'm going to copy and paste this. I'm going to rotate using the blue curve 90 degrees, and then the red minus 90 degrees, kind of like that. Now when I look at it from the top viewport, I can use the actual form to make some choices about what the handle is supposed to do. This example, I've got kind of just like a coffee cup handle or something. The entirety of the handle is just positioned on one side of the form, but I might be able to do kind of like a basket handle that starts on the front and reaches up and then comes back around to the bottom, or at least somewhere on this back side. So here's what I can do. This will be cool. A circle center radius. I'll just make just estimate how much of a circle I really need. And okay, I think I need to make it a bit smaller. So scale. Yeah, this will be good. All right, now I'm going to click on the vessel and hide it for a second so that I can, well, actually, kind of want to keep it there. All right, I need another circle. And I'm going to position this one. Let's see. That. Now I can hide the vessel and trim my first circle here. So I'm going to trim off all this and then just get rid of this. I don't need that anymore. Let's show the vessel again. Okay. Almost there. I just need to, with my now semicircle selected, I want to select this control point and just push it in this way a little bit so that there's some overlap. Okay. And maybe, let's see, maybe with that control point, maybe bring it down some too, like right about there. Okay. All right, now let me go back to perspective. And I'm going to hide this again so that we can take this new curve and use the pipe command, P-I-P-E, in the command bar. And let's let's kind of be precise with what radius we use for our pipes. A 1-inch radius is too big. 0.5 is, I don't know. Let's try 0.3. Maybe that'll work. And then for the other side, so we start with one end, 0.3 for the other end. You can actually change the radius of different points in the pipe, but I want it to be consistent, so I won't do that. And when I press enter, now the pipe is complete, although it looks, let me select this for a second. One closed poly surface. Okay, so it is closed. The only thing I might want to do differently, though, is to better inspect this, I'm going to switch from ghosted to shaded. Okay. And I don't want the flat end on the pipe. So let me Control Z, do the pipe command again, select our geometry, 0.3 inches for this end, 0.3 for the other. Hold on, I was too hasty. Pipe, line, oh, here we go. Sorry. All right, pipe, line. All right, before I do anything here, cap in the command bar. Cap, it was set to flat. I'm going to change that to round. All right, now I can do 0.3 inches on this end, 0.3 inches on the other end, enter to complete, and this looks more usable. So now I'm going to show in the command bar. I'm going to flip this 90 degrees. I tipped it down on its side with -90. I'll use 90 to flip it back up. I'll do the same with the pipe, flip it 90 degrees. Need that curve really anymore. Just want to make sure I position this really carefully. And I think to determine how well things are overlapping, ghosted is a little bit better. So pull this way a little bit. Okay, that's good. So now I can Boolean two objects, click both of these, and the first iteration I think is what I want. So when I click any part of this now, the whole thing highlights and it's one closed poly surface. So now, just like that, you've got your handle. And 3D printing wise, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the interstitial space between the handle and the back side of the vessel, but that's okay. We'll figure that out. All right, let me pull this whole thing over this way a little bit. Last thing we want is a spout. Just like all parts of this project, you can do it all your own way, and if stuff doesn't work, that's fine. We learn best with some amount of error, but a simple shape like this will make for a perfectly fine spout. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the pipe command again. So pipe. And before we get into any specifics here, let's check out a few things in the command bar. Output surface, thick, no. So thick is set to no. I think I really need thick to be a yes, but before I do that, I need the cap. I think cap, I need none. And all right, so thick, now I need thick to be yes. And if we look here, let's see. Let me switch back to perspective. So let's just try a number here for our first radius. Let's try let's try 1 inch. All right, so that's an inch. And it asks for a second radius, but it's not asking us for a second radius as in over here on the other side of the starting geometry. It wants now a second radius in this very spot. This is going to create the wall thickness of this pipe. So I had an inch radius before, so let's pick something reasonable enough. How about 0.7 or maybe 0.75? That way there's a 1/4 inch of wall thickness. Maybe that's a little too much, but I'd rather err on the side of too much than too little. So, all right, now it wants us to address the other end. Your spout can be uniform in size, but I think a spout that narrows as it approaches the end is a little more in keeping with what we expect of vessels like this. So now let's do a 1/2 inch radius for the outer, and maybe something like, I'm just going to estimate this here. That's a 1/2 inch, so this would be about a 1/4. So split the difference, maybe like this. Let's see how that does. Enter to complete. All right, that looks okay. All right, so I'm going to move this new, not the curve, I want the actual spout. Okay. Oh, all right. Notice this. I dragged off one pipe without the other. So there's one more thing I need to do here. And this is familiar territory to all of us. We're going to use surface tools and then surface from planar curves. And we're going to just quickly build connecting surfaces there between the two pipes. Quick and easy. All right, now I'm going to join all of this stuff, and it's a closed poly surface, so this is good for Boolean. Rotate this 90 degrees to stand it up, and then 180 degrees to flip it around. And before I do my Boolean thing here, I think I would rather make a hole in this closed poly surface before trying to Boolean. So all I need to do is quickly go back to curve tools, use the top viewport, and right here, use a circle. I don't want it to be a 1 inch radius circle. I think I would rather keep it a bit smaller. So how about 0.8? Let me compare the two. I just want this hole that I'm going to drill through the vessel to be a little bit smaller than this, but not too small. This will work. Okay. So back to perspective. I'm going to use the extrude CRV command to build some kind of a form here. I'm going to keep it solid and kind of tall. One closed extrusion. Okay, I think this will work. Use the green curved line on the gumball to rotate it 90 degrees. And then overlap this to the best of our ability in the center of this vessel. Just to poke all the way through. And also keep it nice and low, because remember, you're going to put liquid in here, and where my cursor is, you know, as you pour, the liquid is going to drain down, and the more liquid can reach the beginning of this spout, the more liquid you can actually pour through the spout. If it's too high, you know, there's going to be a limitation on how much liquid can actually pour. So how about like here? All right, now in two objects, and let's make sure one closed poly surface. Okay, so great, we've just made a hole. So now we can take our spout, drive it over this way. Let's see, are we there? Just a little higher, a little more inward. Let's see about that. Let me switch from ghosted to shaded and deselect. Doesn't look perfect in here, but maybe it'll work anyway. Just going to take a little ride through the tunnel. Okay, so water should be able to pour out of here, no problem. So last thing is just to Boolean the spout to the rest of the form and double check it. Click somewhere not on the spout just to see one closed poly surface added to selection. The entire thing now is highlighted, so we've got a functional form. Last thing, let's just give it a bit more personal, just something to make it a little more our own. You can do your initials, you can do your whole name spelled out, you can bring in an STL that you find on Thingiverse of a little, I don't know, flower, butterfly, bug, or really anything. I mean, that's what's so cool, is it doesn't really matter what forms you use. You can collage, combine, create all kinds of new exciting forms and print them in just a couple hours. I'll do my initials right beside this. Text in the command bar, text, and then just your initials. Okay, we'll set them down somewhere. Those are a little tiny. You can actually, in the text window, you can change the height, so you can change the size of your text as well as the typeface. But you can also just scale your text to make it a little bit bigger. You can even italicize your text by doing scale 1D and then using your scale factor in this way. Although that didn't work exactly as I thought it would, but I guess in theory you could. All right. So in perspective, real quick, I'm going to take my text and use the explode command. Now my text is vectors. And for each of these, for both at the same time even, I'm going to use extrude CRV and give some dimension. Oh, and I'm going to keep them solid. Otherwise, I'd have to close them up later. So this is now a closed extrusion. This is a closed extrusion. And I can take both of these and overlap them, but not all the way and not in too severe a way. Maybe ghosted would be good for this. Ghosted or rendered. Let's see what rendered tells us. Yeah, rendered kind of helps you understand how deep something is being pushed into another surface. So with Boolean, of course, you can only do 2 objects at a time. So Boolean, 2 objects. Start with the C, if it'll let me. All right, so I've made an impression with the C. Now for the T. Okay, there we go. Now, if you want to Boolean, if you want to like press shapes into exterior things, remember when you slice your STL files in Ultimaker Cura, there's the whole concern of support structures. So more than likely, you're going to want to have supports underneath like the spout. You might even want supports underneath this, although not necessarily. I think it could print a handle without supports. You may want to do supports touching base plate only. That might be a good strategy, which base plate only will prevent supports from building on the inside of your pipe, for example. If you had supports built into the inside of the pipe, how are you supposed to trim those out, you know? So that's just one thing to keep in mind. All right, let's stop it there for today. And all right, go have some fun. Thank you very much for your attention.